welcome to part 3 of my HPV vaccine series. This one I want to talk about the efficacy of the vaccine. I will save the safety of the vaccine for future videos. Well, to start with, we have to talk about cervical cancer incidence and the death from cervical cancer that's caused by the HPV virus. Before the vaccine ever came out, there were about 4,200 deaths from cervical cancer every single year. After the vaccine came out in 2006, if you look at 2025 data, there were 4,320 deaths from cervical cancer. So the deaths have not changed. And that's important when you look at the studies. One of the biggest drivers at reducing cervical cancer incidence, or the cases of cervical cancer, is a pap smear. Pap smears reduce cervical cancer rates by about 86%. And in 2025, the FDA actually approved a pap smear in-home kit that you can do without going to the doctor's office, which should continue to reduce the incidence of cervical cancer because it can detect those precancerous cells leading to cervical cancer. All right, now let's get into the actual efficacy of the vaccine. The first two trials were called the Future 1 and Future 2 studies that looked at Gardasil that covered 4 strains, mainly the 16 and 18, because that, like I said, is responsible for 70% of all HPV-related cervical cancers. And what they found was that it significantly reduced overall lesions caused by that specific virus. It also reduced precancerous lesions caused by those 2 viruses. Now, the next study is the Gardasil 9 study, which was comparing Gardasil 9, which looks at 9 different types of HPV, comparing that to the regular Gardasil, which just did 4. Again, still covering the 16 and 18. Again, it found a reduction in precancerous lesions. Now, I want to be specific because the study did not have any cancers in it. So there was no reduction in cervical cancer. There was a reduction in the precancerous lesions that lead to cervical cancer. These studies showed a reduction in precancerous lesions that can lead to cervical cancer. They did not find a reduction in cancer. They also did not find a reduction in deaths. Why? Well, these studies were done in 16 to 24-year-olds. They followed them for 3 years, so the odds of having any type of cancer in these studies is very, very low, especially when there's only 5,000, 6,000 women in these studies. So there was no hard outcome of reducing cancer or reducing death in the studies, but there was a significant reduction in the precancerous lesions that lead to these cancers.